In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a wafer paper peony, and they're really pretty easy. You can either vein the leaves like this or not, the petals, but they end up looking like this. I painted this one silver. I've just been messing with it to see what I could do to it. But as you can see, it's just a circle of the wafer paper. It's kind of melded into it right now. It's a circle of the paper, and then you just attach the petals one by one, and it's very simple. You don't have to vein them. I'll show you a way to do it without doing that. But the way that you start, I made this veiner using Amazing Mold Putty, which you can get at the craft store. And I have this veiner that I got from, it's New York Cake, it's one of the James Roselle lines. This is for a parrot tulip, and it's got some really nice deep veins in it. And I just mixed up the mold putty and rolled it out, and then took this and pressed it in, over and over, every space I could get. So that's how I made that. And to do this, these are already dried, so look how these look, and just remember that, because when they dry they kind of release from the mold, and then you can just take them up and put them in a container for future reference. So I have this whole container that I've made of them, and it's funny, when they get wet they get really, they're crinkly. It's not the same texture as the paper was to begin with, but you can really bend them. They're not going to break. If you really take it and tear it, it will. But what I do is just do one mat full and just walk away and let it dry, and then come back and collect them later. So I've got that. I use those. Alright, so you hold on to all of these, and then when you're ready to make the flower you can take it out and put it together. But actually I'll show how to make the first one, or how I do the leaves, the petals. I keep saying leaves, I'm meaning petals. This is my spray bottle of vodka, which my kids think is hilarious that I have a spray bottle of vodka. Doesn't everybody? I don't understand. I just think it's normal. I go to the liquor store and just say, I need the biggest, cheapest bottle of vodka that you have, and then I realize how that sounds. So I have to try to remember not to say that, but that's usually what I get. So I'm taking the mat. Now I've just cut out some random petal shapes. And I'll just show you how to do a few of these so you don't have to watch me do the whole mat. But they, just cut out random shapes. They can be different sizes. These are the really big ones that would go on the outside. And then little smaller ones. And I have a whole lot of the smaller ones, so I didn't do a lot of those. But I needed the big ones. So the first thing you do, take your vodka, because that will evaporate very quickly, and just dip the whole petal right in there. Get it nice and wet, and take it out and slap it on the mat. It's very scientific and it's very difficult. Not really. Alright, so just keep doing that. You just want to get it wet and put it on the mat. So you basically just want to do this as many times as you need, and it's going to take, you need to do 6 or 7 at a time, because that's how many are going to fit on this thing. So you're going to fill up the whole thing. And then what I do is come back with a little foam brush, because these don't stick to the wafer paper when it's wet. And I kind of press it into the folds. And then when it dries, it's going to stick to the impressions that are in there and give it a little petally shape. Now, if you don't have a veiner mat, or you don't want to make one, it's not a big deal. You can do kind of more of a fantasy flower. It's just not going to have the veins in it. And there might be different ways to do this. Wafer paper has been around forever. It's all of a sudden gotten really popular, so people have been figuring out different ways to do things. And I'm sure there's about 12 different ways to do this. This is just the way that I figured out that's fastest. So let me pour this back in. Okay. And you use vodka, not water, because vodka evaporates a lot faster. You can use water, but it's just going to take a lot longer to dry. So leave these on the mat, fill the whole mat up. I just did a few. Fill the whole mat up, leave them to dry, and when they dry, they'll release the way that you saw in the first part. So they'll just pop right up, they're done, and you can put them in the container. Alright, when it comes time to put the flower together, I'm actually going to move this out of the way. Now I use a Teflon mat that I got years ago to line cake pans, and I think that you can use like parchment paper, silicone mat, whatever, just anything that you don't want the wafer paper to stick to. Wafer paper is basically like mashed potato flakes and vegetable oil all mixed up. It's just desiccated potatoes So it's going to dissolve and turn to complete starchy glue if you get it too wet. So the way that I do this, I start with a circle. That's going to be the base. And you're going to pick out some of your larger petals. I start from the outside and work up. So let's get 5 of these. Now here I have a little bit of water, and I'm using water for this just because I always do. You can use vodka. It'll dry just as fast. Just a little bit of water on there will make it sticky. And I put a little bit on here too, because that's going to make both parts sticky. Let me move this over a little bit. Okay. Now you can see that this is starting to curl up a little bit. Well, you might not be able to see that, but I can see it. So all you do is take this, press it down there, and then you're going to work your way around, adding each leaf, petal. I keep saying leaf. This is not scientific. You're not going to do this wrong. And you don't want to put too much water on there. You just want to get it a little bit sticky. And if it comes up, just press it down. You can see right now how this is flexible because it's starting to melt. And this is going to be the outer rim of the flowers. So if you want it to be a little bit smaller than that, just move the petals in toward the center a little bit. Okay, and press all those down. You might want to have a dry paper towel around in case you either spill the water or just to keep your hands dry, because if you start touching the wafer paper with wet hands, it's going to get all sticky in the top too, and you don't want that. Alright, so there's the first layer. Now you can either leave that alone or do what I do because I'm impatient. Just add a little bit more water and get some more petals and do a second layer. And this actually does take quite a while to dry. Now on this one I'm putting it in right toward the center because I don't need it to be that big. It does take a while to dry, so don't do this the day that you need the flower, because unless you're using the vodka, which will evaporate a little bit faster, it is going to take a little bit to dry because you're putting so much water in the middle. And this is a little bit big, so I'm just going to take it and scooch it in toward itself. Because this circle in the middle is now completely wet and it's melting. See how flexible it is? I don't know where I'm holding the camera. It's very flexible, it's kind of melty. So I'm just going to press it in to make that a little bit smaller. And the bases of the petals are also getting soft and gluey and melting. So if you wanted to move those around, you can do that. Alright. And since I just kind of free-handed the petals, I just cut them out without using any kind of pattern. They're all different sizes. But that's fine, because a real flower doesn't have a template. And the petals are all different sizes. Okay. So see, just holding this down is making it stick because the potato starch just starts to stick right to itself. You don't need to use any special glues or anything like that. I've done this with gum glue, and that does work, but the gum glue tends to dry and kind of like curl up. It gets kind of inflexible and it curls up. So water just lets it dry and it doesn't move, it doesn't contract the flower, which the gum glue can do sometimes. Alright, so there's that. So there's the second row. Now if you do this and you think that it's going to be too big, don't worry about it, because you can always go back and trim the edges of the petals with scissors if you want it to be a little bit smaller. That is not a big deal. Alright, so you basically are just going to keep working on each row of petals and work your way into the center. And I'm going to do this whole thing. You don't have to watch this whole video. It's going to be long, as long as you get the idea, or just skip ahead. Because I know how watching people do things is a little bit tedious sometimes. And when you're making the petals, just make sure that you do a whole lot of different sizes so that you have a lot to choose from. Because if you get to the point where you only have giant petals and you need teeny tiny ones for the middle. You can cut them, like I said, with the scissors, but it's just easier to do them so you have a variety of sizes to begin with. Yes, I encourage people to skip ahead in videos because why do you really need to watch this? Every single step. And this is the kind of thing that you will not know exactly how to do this until you do it yourself, because I can't describe how this feels. It feels kind of gluey and sticky, and I'm drying my hands off right now. But until you feel that and you can kind of judge how much water you need, that kind of thing, it's hard to have somebody explain it to you. All right, now when you're getting into the center, just move the petals so that they're more upright if you want it to be standing up. All right. I'm trying to look for some smaller petals. I made a whole lot of giant ones. See, and this is stiff, but as the water soaks into the center section, it's going to bend like that, and then I can stand this up taller. You can turn the paintbrush around and use that to press it down, and that'll keep the water off of your hands too. Let's see. I'm a big believer in using a single tool for multiple purposes, because the fewer times you have to put things down and pick things up, the easier it is to get things done. Alright, now see, as I'm getting toward the center here, I'm going to make it, the petals stand up more, as opposed to pressing them down flat. And you can make this as full or as thin as you want. It doesn't have to be super, super full. If you want a flower that doesn't have quite as many petals. If you wanted to do a flower like this and then take some stamens and put them in the middle of it, excuse me, you can just take some regular floral stamens, wrap them on a wire, and then insert it right through the middle once it's all dried. And that will give you the look of the yellow stamens in the middle. And if you do that and attach it with some more wafer paper, it just glues to itself. And right after this, I'm going to do a little video on how to make a hydrangea, which are also very simple. But that flower uses a lot of the fact that the wafer paper sticks to itself to make the centers and that kind of thing. Alright, see, so as I'm right in the middle here, I'm just standing the petals upright. I'm not even trying to make them lay down. You just want to make sure that the center is actually pressing against the base of the little disc that you made to begin with. Okay, now at this point I'm going to stop. Well, I'll do one more. But after this one, I'm going to stop and let that dry. And like I said, this could take a while to dry because I'm using water, not vodka. And depending on how humid it is where you are, it can take a while for this to dry. And what I usually do is I'll let this dry, and then I'll go back and just take some more petals. Now see, these two kind of dried together. No big deal, just tear it. I'll take some more petals and insert them in just to make the flower look fuller. And at that point, when this is stiff, you'll be able to put some little tiny ones in the middle there and really bring out the fullness in there. So there's your basic flower. If you don't have the petal veiners, you can still make them and make them a little bit curved by just taking a petal. Let's see. Scissors. Okay, if you take the petals and just cut a little slit in them like that, then you want to take a very small amount of water and just put it right down the cut. And you're going to take this and kind of fold it on itself and hold it for a minute. Just press it. And the wafer paper will stick to itself, and it gives you a little bit of a curve in the petal so that when you put it together, it's not just lying flat. And I'm not really a big fan of the fantasy flowers that have big petals like this, because I like the veining on it. But if you don't have access to the mats or the veiners, then this is a decent option. So see how that's holding? Just let that dry, and it gives you a curve to the petal so that it looks a little bit more natural. And then you can also take a little bit more water, and this is a good place to use the vodka too, and just right around the edge, just a little bit, put some water on there. And what will happen is that will start to absorb the water. You don't want to put too much on there, but it'll start to absorb and it'll start to curl. See how this is curling right there? So you can press that down. And you can give the edges a little bit of a more realistic look as opposed to having it so flat. You can do a little bit more. Since I just put that on the edge, I think I'll make this look more like a rose petal. So rose petals curve kind of from the tip down. So just brush it on, let it sit for a minute. I can see that it's starting to curve on its own. Then you can go back with your finger and just put it where you want it. Get the position where you want it. Okay. So that gives you a curved petal that has the edge like a rose petal. And once you're done with that, you can also dry these on spoons. If you have a bunch of plastic spoons, I use those sometimes to make the rose petals. Just take the small petal shape and do it on a, do this and then rest it on a spoon so that the spoon is like this, and you fold this down over the edge, and it helps to maintain that shape while it's drying. But that'll give you a better, more natural feel to the shape as opposed to just leaving it flat, which I'm not a huge fan of. So there's that. Alright, so I'm going to let that dry and then come back. And when I'm done, I'll fill it in. This one's a little smaller, but see how like I went back here and kind of probably filled that in. I might have put this in that looks like it's in kind of second time around. But just any empty spaces, if you want it to look fuller, just stick another petal in there with the water, and it'll end up being like that. And these, I'm not sure exactly what happens to this wafer paper, but when it gets wet, completely wet, like I dipped the petals in the vodka and stuck it on the mat, it's really stiff. It's a very strange thing. And to insert this on the cake, if you're using buttercream, I would be really careful using this on buttercream for any length of time, because it might absorb the oils in the buttercream and soften up, and then it'll just melt. But if you're attaching this with to fondant, you can use gum glue, corn syrup. What I would do is just take a toothpick and stick it right in the back of the flower like this. Just make sure it's not coming through. You want to stick it somewhere where it's not obvious on the other side. But because it's just paper, you can just stick that right in there and then put it right in the cake. So this will be attached to the cake. It's not going to fall off, and it's food safe, so you don't have to worry about that. And just tell whoever's going to cut the cake that there are toothpicks in the cake, because you don't want somebody to not know that. Just tell them to make sure that each flower has a toothpick that's pulled out. But that's the easiest way to attach them to cakes. And this is a really simple technique. It's very easy. You can get wafer paper online. There's, I think, one company in Holland that makes it, and it seems to come from the same supplier. I sell it in my Etsy shop. You can get it at certain cake supply shops, and it's really fast to work with. And I'm going to put all this stuff away and then make another video about how to do hydrangeas. So keep an eye out for that, and I hope that was helpful.